So, let's get into a little bit of F1 stuff. Not too much. A little dabble, a little seasoning before we get into the mailbag this time around. But King, like, this Halo topic obviously is not going to go away anytime soon. And of course, Hungary was like, we didn't talk about this on last week's show. We didn't really have time for it, but we talked about obviously the Halo being made obviously mandatory for next season, but we didn't talk about the Thursday video briefing of why the Halo was being brought in. And look, we had a written guide put out the week before, which, you know, people hate reading. So, you know, like, people like pictures and video. So we had a video. I think it was Charlie Whiting who was heading this. I didn't actually see it because I read the article itself talking about why it was, you know, why it was a thing, and I thought that was sufficient enough. But so King, like, they had this great big video conference and they fully explained why the Halo was a thing.
Well, they fully explained. They went from pretty much the inception of the idea of having the Halo all the way up to today, including all the testing that went into it, all the simulations that they used. They also ran down pretty much all the major case studies that they used, where I think they assessed the Halo in a couple of different circumstances. I think car-to-car contact, car-to-environment incidents, and pretty much any incident that you can think of that they pretty much broke down into a couple of case studies. The big ones, like the big ones that they used were Dan Weldon's incident, Greg Moore's incident, both in IndyCar. They also did Marcos Campos' fatal incident in International Formula 3000, GP2's predecessor.
Right.
They also did the two fatal incidents at Marussia, the Jules' fatal incident and Maria Di Velota's fatal incident.
Right, exactly, and I'm guessing they went into detail about how this would have saved them, more than likely.
Yes,
and,
pretty much.
Yeah.
There are two minor incidents they mentioned where, like, the Halo was neither a positive or a negative. That was, like, the worst case scenarios that they could find. But for the most part, like, every incident that they applied the Halo to and did, like, ran simulations for, like, the Halo was a net positive.
Right. But King, why didn't they have the shield?
Well, it's hard to make glass withstand, like, 15 times the weight of the car itself.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem.
The Halo obviously being made out of reinforced steel and carbon fiber, like, it can actually withstand 15 times the static load of the car itself.
That's a lot of weight. Yeah, so I'm just glad. Like, the only thing I regret over this, King, is that we didn't get this a year ago, or we didn't. Or maybe it wasn't ready for that point. Maybe they wouldn't have had all the data to make it happen. But this was so necessary to me to get this out there, just to educate the fans on so, like, you know, this, yeah, like, because let's be real, on a visual, this is an extreme, and, you know, this is an extreme compared to what we've had before. I know it isn't in the grand scheme of F1, but in the context of where we are now, this is a big visual change, and, like, better preparing the fans for this might have saved a good deal of backlash, because I read the article that they put out on their website regarding this a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, it sounded reasonable, it sounded fair, it sounded credible, it ticked every box for me, and I think if that was put out 6 months, 12 months, 18 months ago, I think people would have been a bit more welcoming towards the idea of a Halo, as opposed to seeing this now and going, oh, so that's why they're bringing it in.
And it's not even an "oh, that's why" moment. People are still clearly against it, even though, like, they did side-by-side comparisons using the FIA's own visibility standards for LMP1, where the cars with the Halo have better visibility than LMP1 cars.
And they have full closed cockpits on them.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, the myth about visibility doesn't really hold up either. Especially when George...
They even tipped a mock-up of an F1 car with a halo over, had an engineer in the car, and the engineer was able to climb out, no issue. Even, like, people looking at it were like, this is better because the car rests, like, pretty much the car is propped up by the halo, so it's actually easier to get out of the car.
Yeah, like that would have been really helpful for Pascal Wehrlein earlier this season at Monaco when Jenson Button accidentally but very accurately flipped his car into a wall. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I could see the purchase and I could see how that would definitely help because the halo can take the weight of the car and then some. So, yeah, like you say, I was already sold on the Halo. Like, this cemented it. I think it's only gonna get better as time goes on, of course, as more research and more time and, the teams are able to apply what they think is a better idea as well. I mean, again, these are some of the smartest people in sports. They know what they're doing. They will find a way to make this work on a greater scale for everybody. But, again, I just feel like this should have happened earlier, and I think the FIA needs to do a slightly better job of communicating with fans. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we as fans are often ignorant to this sometimes, and I think sometimes we can't help ourselves. I'll be the first guy to admit this, but I think in the grand scheme of things, I think the FIA could have done this earlier. I really do. And again, it might have saved some of the slightly understandable fan backlash, but at the same time... This is also going to be a very hard fan base to convince on this. And, well, King, we're not going to convince anybody here, but you might as well try. So Jackie Stewart chipped through in his 2 cents, didn't he?
Oh, yes. Jackie Stewart. Yeah, ahead of the launch of the Great British Racing Drivers season on UK TV, he pretty much put out his belief about the Halo out there. And it was intense, to say the least. Like, quote, my view is if you could save a life, and if some of these people, if they had been to as many funerals as I've been to and wept as much as I have, and seen close friends die, they wouldn't object. That's all finished because we've got technology that's taken away. I'm afraid I don't have a negative of the Halo. I read the correspondence columns that say that this is the end of Formula One, I'm out of it, I can't stick with this. Well, that was like people saying Jackie Stewart's going to kill motor racing because of track safety.
I can't believe back then people were saying that Jackie Stewart's going to kill the sport by somehow making it safer. People actually believed that shit back then. Yeah. Like I give the human race too much credit sometimes. Clearly, it's. You know what it's like, King. I mean, we joked about this before we went on the air, but it's like some people are so protective over what they think is the sanctity of Formula One that, any idea to make the sport safer, which is inherently and basically justifiably a good thing. There's having the Halo is not going to affect the racing. It's only going to affect the placebo in our heads that cars have to look pretty, which is a subjective thing anyway. Yeah. And it is universally regarded to be safer than what we have right now. And as I said before, these are some of the same fans that were weeping and are still justifiably upset for Jules Bianchi 2 years ago because it was the second anniversary of his passing. I think it was last week or so. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we're also like having something that that we've pushed hard to research, something that could save future lives to similar related injuries like this, and we're like, oh no, we can't have that. Like, I just find it baffling, King.
Yeah, and it's like, I think Jackie also, he adds on, preventative medicine is considerably more important than corrective medicine. Corrective medicine is also considerably more expensive than preventative medicine. The Halo, in my opinion, is necessary because Henry Surtees got killed, not by his wheel, but by someone else's. Well, that could happen at any time. That was just bad luck. Why depend on luck?
Because people like to gamble. Take it from me as a guy that works in the industry. Like, people will gamble on anything. And I do mean anything. And unfortunately, in the eyes, I think, of many F1 fans, they feel that, you know, the reasons why they're a Formula One fan, like the sex appeal of the cars and the thrill of the danger, like, it's like on a scale, with that being on one side and safety being on the other, and they can't ever be equal. And I don't think that's the case. And I've said that before, I don't think people will stop watching over this. I really don't. I think it's the same deal as when people were moaning about the engine noises, you know, and they say, oh, these don't sound like the V8s or the V10s do. Like, it's terrible. And it's like, well, no. And you get used to it after 3 rounds, and people say you can actually have a conversation during a Grand Prix now, which is inherently a good thing. So, you know, like, we as F1 fans are a very protective, defensive bunch, and, you know.
Then, Zoe?
I mean, safety's been constantly evolving. Since Jackie sort of spearheaded the campaign back in the 60s, the safety has been constantly evolving. Because, gotta remember, like, it used to be bales of hay, and then they brought in AMCO barriers. And then, obviously, IndyCar turned around, safety barriers. And then you have, like, they got Sid Watkins to attend races to be an on-site medical person. And then, after what happened with Ronnie Peterson, where he couldn't get to him because of the police and that, they put him in a car that followed the race, the first lap of the race, so if there was any big incidents at the start of the race, he was already there. Like, when things go wrong, we look at why it happened. Is there anything we can do to change it? Yes, let's get it organised. That's how the sport has got safer. And the thing is, it's not, like, you can't even say it's gotten, like, really safe, because as it gets safer, the drivers then turn around and go, right, I can now, like, push the car that bit harder, because I know if I go off the track, I'm going into a gravel pit. I'm not going into a field of trees. Yeah. So I can take that dive bomb, no, I'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think, like, Jackie actually brings that up, where he says there's no point in saying that the previous eras were just dangerous, and then you had to be careful and cautious, and then when men were men, bullshit. That is an exact quote from Jackie Stewart. He said,
Jackie Stewart has no chill.
And he says, however, if you start, like, he says that racing drivers have never changed, but if you start taking liberties because you can have huge accidents, and you know that you know the other guy's going to survive, he basically says once that goes away, you can't, you know, push the car to the limit. You have to drive in a way that you know is going to be safe. Like, he goes to that, you know, internet point where it's like, we want to see the drivers drive at the limit. Well, he says if the cars aren't safe, they're not going to drive at the limit.
I mean,
don't get started on Canada 2015 again, King.
I mean, imagine turning around to, like, some of the driver, like, even like Jim Clark, especially regarding the 1961 Monza Grand Prix, where him and Wolfgang von Tripp's wheels touched. Wolfgang's car flipped in the air, he was flung out of the car, his car flipped into the crowd and out of the crowd. Imagine if you took the Jim Clark who's just witnessed that, who's just been in that crash, and brought him to present day for like any flip that's happened, like the Mark Webber and was it Kovalainen, when he hit the back of Kovalainen, flipped, and then
yes,
or even with Scott Dixon and Jay Howard, like, this is how safe the sport is going to become. Like imagine showing him that, like, for him that equaled death. Now you walk away from it.
Yeah, pretty much, because I know, like, in 1955, when the Le Mans disaster happened, that was pretty much the line. That was the line saying that spectators can no longer, you know, die at motor racing events. And Jackie Stewart was the line where drivers could no longer die at motor racing events, where like the public idea of motor racing in terms of safety drastically changed.
That might be a greater legacy for Jackie Stewart than the 3 world titles he won in just 99 career Grand Prix. That he was the voice and the beacon for safety in Formula One, and, you know, that's something that I think he can be immensely proud of, because look how far we've come.
Well, just, you know, all you have to do is look at, like, the time where he raced, where 1968, like, the year Jim Clark died, that was the last year where all the tracks had no safety features at all. By the time Jackie Stewart retired, you had every racetrack had to have Armco, every racetrack had to have a medical center, drivers had to have medical examinations before every race, and the year he retired, they introduced the 5-second rule. You had to be able to get out the car in 5 seconds.
And that's stuff that's staples of motor racing now. Jesus. So, you know, it's absolutely, you know, it's absolutely important that we keep doing this. It's really, really important, and yeah, hopefully that we should never stop having conversations about safety, and again, we should be more proactive about this, and I'm glad that the Halo is the first step in that. And again, I just hope that's a thing that continues. I really do.